So many Democrats reached out to me yesterday. I was just like, I can't believe he's going to get away with it again. There's this sense of frustration that Trump always seems to escape, to slip the hook.
People in the media, people at home, and people sitting in the White House have to stop pretending that the Supreme Court is some kind of benign, trying to do its best institution and start to realize that there are 6 Republicans, not conservatives, Republicans on the Supreme Court who view it as their job to help the Republican Party. And until we do something about that, until we take away that power, until we draw the line on them there, they will continue to do this. They will help Trump. They will take away abortion rights. They will end affirmative action. They will liberalize gun rights. They will do all of it until we stop them. And somebody needs to start listening in the higher echelons of the Democratic Party, because we will keep losing every day we allow these 6 Republicans in robes to rule over all of us. Clarence Thomas doesn't want to die on that court, and he's getting old, and he's never going to retire during a Democratic president. So Clarence Thomas, one of the reasons why he's not recusing himself is that Clarence Thomas needs Trump to win again so Clarence Thomas can retire. And most likely, Sam Alito needs Trump to win again so Alito can retire instead of having to die.
I almost feel bad for him, man. The left is completely coming apart. They're imploding. And as bad as I feel, we do have to have some fun at their expense. I did a video on this yesterday, but there's just too much goodness. I got to go back to the well because they're losing it. And if you've been lucky enough to miss this particular circus, here's a quick timeline for you. So President Trump petitioned the court, Judge Tanya Chutkan, to assert his federally granted absolute immunity, which the judge denied. Then the Trump team appealed that ruling to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. Jack Smith, protector of all things holy and democratic, tried to leapfrog the circuit court and get the Supreme Court to issue a ruling. They expedited whether or not they'd intervene and make a decision, and the liberals all over hailed them as complete and total heroes. They were going to save the day. Then they said, no, we're actually too busy. We're going to let this play out. We're going to see what the lower court does. Mainly because Jack Smith couldn't give them a good reason why they need to go fast, right? Liberals the world over impugned the court for not hearing that case. They were begging the court to hear it, and they were crazy not to, basically. Then the appeals court said no to Trump. You do not have immunity. Trump then appealed that to the Supreme Court, and now they're going to take it up because absolute immunity is incredibly important, and not just the president, to all federal officials. And of course, after begging the court to hear it, liberals are now losing their minds that the court will dare hear this case. But let's watch them just flop around just a tiny little bit.
It's really hard to understand the decision, Wolf, except that it is likely some of the justices simply want to assist Donald Trump in delaying the resolution of this case in the hope of pushing his trial off past the election. If that were to happen, then of course Donald Trump would try to, if successful in the election, make the whole case go away. And I say that as a very likely motivation for some of these justices, because there's no reason to take this case. The legal and constitutional issues are not difficult. If a president was immunized in trying to overturn a presidential election, that would mean that any subsequent president could call out the military, could seize ballot boxes, and if they were ever prosecuted for it, they would be held immune. That would be the end of our constitutional system. The ultimate check on a president's power is the ability to vote them out of office. You take away voters' ability to do that by saying you're immune from essentially trying to overturn the election, and it's chaos.
So this is going to be an argument I think you're going to hear them go to a lot in the coming weeks. Of course, they're going to try out all kinds of different random vitriolic tactics. They're going to throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. But if I had to put money on it, I think this is going to be the one that sticks because it's clever. Because, most people don't truly understand exactly what it is they're saying. And you have to listen to his exact words. Shifty Shift here says there's no reason to take this case because there's no difficult constitutional or legal question. He says that there's no way that a president would be immunized against trying to overturn a presidential election. And guess what? He is 100% correct. He's absolutely right. But the problem is that's not the question. He's not charged with trying to overturn an election. He's charged with fraud for just questioning the validity of the votes in certain counties, which is his right. It's the right of any citizen. He's charged with 2 counts of conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding because the government believes that he was responsible for the mob at the Capitol. Another insane allegation, but it's just an allegation, right? And he's also charged with conspiracy against rights, which is related to count 1, the questioning of the validity of someone's vote. Because if you question their vote, or if you do something to stop their vote, you're also conspiring against their rights if their vote is valid, right? Obviously, there's a lot here. There's a lot we can talk about for hours and hours and hours, but here's the basic gist. If his questioning of the votes that the government alleges that he should have just rolled over and accepted because they said so, were within the rights of any citizen or any president, and if his alleged control of that crowd that the government says he conspired with to obstruct an official proceeding, if his control of that crowd came from speeches given in the course of his duty as president, then there are some unresolved legal and constitutional questions left unanswered. And poor Shifty Schiff, he's correct. No one is immunized from overturning an election. Luckily for Trump, he's not charged with that.
Move forward in the preliminary stages, and also heard arguments and rendered a decision to affirm that the trial could move forward in the summer. The court had other options, and I really do think that the justices on the left were struggling to find something, salvage something out of this over the last few weeks that would make it anything less than a disaster. But frankly, it appears that they have failed, and I cannot come up with any other justification for what the court has done here. Delaying over and over again, allowing Trump to run out the clock.
And I am, to be honest with you, a bit dejected by this ruling because I'm not a lawyer. I'm the non-lawyer on this panel. But I read the district court ruling, and it seemed very thorough. I had you on. I've had all of you all on. And I think we've all agreed that it was thorough and that it didn't necessarily need the Supreme Court to jump in. But now they have.
But the fact that they delayed even this order that basically just says we're going to take it up, that they delayed it for 2 weeks, suggests that they certainly did not embrace the urgency that Special Counsel Jack Smith tried to impose upon them way back in December, when Jack Smith went to the Supreme Court and said, Justices, please take up this case now so that we can get a clear answer. This is yours to answer. And then, once the Supreme Court said, no, we're not coming in, and the D.C. Circuit ruled, that was another several weeks. So former President Trump's effort to run the clock has a partner in the Supreme Court at this.
Another one you're going to keep hearing. These people, they keep talking about the urgency. The court's just not responding to the urgency. It's urgent. We got to do it fast. It's got to be handled quick. And the people that are saying this, they just can't be aware, right? But if they are aware, how can they explain the hundreds and hundreds of cases that are much more complicated than President Trump's supposed kingpin case that took years and years and years to wind through the D.C. courts? These people are just too close to this to realize that the urgency that they feel has nothing to do with judicial expediency. It's all based on political expediency. It's based on the schedule of a presidential election, and that's just not how criminal courts and criminal cases are intended to work. And honestly, every single one of us from every end of the spectrum, we all better hope that that's not how they ever do work.
Is really presidential immunity an open question? Because what's the most famous pardon in American history? Gerald Ford pardoning Richard Nixon once he had resigned and was a former president. Why did Gerald Ford pardon Richard Nixon? Quote, as a result of certain acts or omissions occurring before his resignation as president, meaning as a result of stuff he did while president, quote, Richard Nixon has become liable to possible indictment and trial. Right. Whether or not he shall be so prosecuted depends on findings of the appropriate grand jury and the discretion of the authorized prosecutor. So the idea that this is an open question, that it might be that a former president can never be tried for something that he did because he was president when he did it, is disproven by a plain reading of American history and the whole justification for Richard Nixon being pardoned in the first place. So the idea that this has to be taken up is them saying the sky is green.
Right.
And I think even for the non-lawyers among us to be able to say, you know what, the sky is not green even on our worst day, this is BS. You are doing this as a dilatory tactic to help your political friend, your partisan patron. And for you to say that this is something that the court needs to decide because it's something that's unclear in the law is just flagrant bullpucky. And they know it, and they don't care that we know it, and that's disturbing about the future legitimacy.
Now, here's just another angle on the argument that Trump can't possibly be immune from the crimes they say he committed. The problem, again, is he isn't charged with the crimes that they say he committed, like all the cases. I mean, That is the one thing that all these cases have in common. He is not charged with anything even remotely close to what they all say that he did. They're purposefully muddying the waters here and taking advantage of the poor people that really depend on them. She brings up Richard Nixon to prove that, presidents don't have immunity from crimes committed as president. And that is true, unless they, of course, involve drones. Then they have immunity from those, but no one cares about those. But that's enough about Barack Obama. Here's where she got it wrong, and she got it wrong on purpose. Richard Nixon was allegedly involved in a burglary. There is no absolute immunity for that. The burglary was not related to his duties as president. That said, even someone like our friend Rachel would admit that Donald Trump investigating alleged illegal votes and giving speeches is not the same thing as a presidential burglary.
Elise, it is maddening because the Supreme Court knows that there's a consequential election in November, yet they showed no urgency in setting the date of oral argument for April 22nd. Now, a more cynical view, to answer your question, is to interpret the Supreme Court decision as a nefarious act of putting their thumb on the scale to benefit their favorite candidate. I'm not sure I want to go that far, but it's disturbing. I mean, when Trump needed an expedited oral argument for his Colorado case, the Supreme Court complied. And then when Trump wanted to delay the D.C. case to avoid facing the music, the Supreme Court here complied. First, back in December, the court blocked Jack Smith's attempt to skip over the D.C. Court of Appeals and go straight to the Supreme Court. Then, when the Supreme Court finally got the case, they sat on their decision for 2 weeks. And then when they ruled, not only did they grant the review, they also granted a stay, which they didn't have to. And then they rejected Jack Smith's proposal of an oral argument in March. Instead, they settled on this April 22nd date, which is the last week that the court is scheduled to hear arguments this term. My favorite drummer in the world, the late, great Neil Peart, once said, "If you choose not to decide, you'll still have made a choice." Well, delay is a choice. And when the Supreme Court wants to move quickly, it does. Like in Bush v. Gore in 2000, they consciously chose the opposite here. So it's abundantly clear that there is no cavalry coming to save our democracy. Only the voters can do that.
Oh my gosh, what a freaking concept. Allow the voters to save democracy? Allow the voters to do democracy? I mean, and not some government-directed cavalry? I don't think he meant to make that much sense, but that's where we are. Again, with the argument of urgency. The fact that there's an election coming up is not a deciding factor on how quickly you should prosecute someone or which steps you should skip and how much you should rush to get there, right? And it's fully and truly amazing to me to hear these people say these things out loud without the ability to catch themselves and really hear their own words, right? If Donald Trump had said someone must be rushed through the court system, skip those steps and skip that steps, rush some other ones, just make it look official because we've got to stop this person and save democracy. These people would completely lose their minds. They would be waking up from authoritarian nightmares for literally the rest of their lives, but they just can't seem to put it all together when they're the ones that they think are in control. But he's absolutely right. The voters will have the final say in who saves our democracy. There's no doubt about that. And that is so democratic that I'm sure it makes a lot of these people actually physically ill. But that's just my take, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't already, be a part of our growth. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, share the channel. I'll see you in the next one.